Hey, my name's Ethan. I'm 25, living in a small apartment just outside Denver, Colorado. I'm a freelance coder, mostly picking up front-end gigs for startups that don't have the budget for a full-time team. It's not the dream job, but it pays. The rent keeps my fridge stocked and lets me work from home in sweatpants most days. Life's been pretty straightforward. Code, coffee, maybe a run in the evening if I'm feeling ambitious. I don't have a big circle, just a few close friends like Jordan. He's been my best friend since high school. The kind of guy who can make you laugh even when you're having the worst day. Jordan's mom, Miss Sophia, is a different story. She's 43, works as an admin manager for some logistics company downtown. I've known her since I was a kid, but it's always been from a distance. She's not the typical mom you picture. No frumpy sweaters or baking cookies for the neighborhood. Sophia's got this quiet strength, sharp, confident, like she's seen things and come out stronger. She used to be an army nurse, which explains the way she carries herself, like nothing catches her off guard. I've always kept my distance, not because she's intimidating, but because she's Jordan's mom. That's a line you don't cross, right? Last weekend, Jordan roped me into a company camping trip his mom's firm was hosting. A 2-day trek in the Rockies not too far from Denver. It's just some light hiking, he said, tossing me a spare backpack. Mom's going too. You in? I wasn't thrilled. Coding deadlines were piling up, but I hadn't left the city in months, and the idea of fresh air sounded better than another Netflix binge. So, I packed a bag, threw in some granola bars, and met them at the trailhead Saturday morning. The group was small, maybe 10 of us, mostly Sophia's coworkers, middle-aged office types, and brand new hiking gear. Jordan and I were the odd ones out, younger, a bit out of place. Sophia led the pack, setting the pace with this steady, no-nonsense stride. She wore a fitted jacket, cargo pants, hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. I caught myself noticing how she moved, not stiff or showy, just capable. She'd stop to point out a trail marker or check everyone's water like she was still in nurse mode, making sure no one keeled over. We drove up in 2 vans winding through pine-covered hills until we hit the base camp, a clearing with a fire pit and a view of snow-capped peaks. The air was crisp, smelling of sap and earth. The plan was simple. Set up tents, hike a few miles to a lookout point, then back for dinner. The trails weren't hardcore, just rolling paths through forest. Nothing to worry about, or so we thought. Jordan and I joked around, tossing a frisbee while the group unpacked. Sophia caught my eye once, giving me a half-smile as she adjusted her pack. "You boys keeping up?" She called, her voice light, but with that edge of authority. I grinned back, shrugging, trying to. By mid-afternoon, we were on the trail, moving in smaller groups to cover more ground. The sky was clear, sunlight filtering through the trees, casting long shadows. Jordan got stuck with a chatty coworker who kept talking about stock portfolios. So, I ended up walking with Sophia and a guy named Mark, some accountant who seemed more interested in his phone than the scenery. Sophia led the way, pointing out a deer track or a patch of wild flowers, her voice calm, but carrying this quiet enthusiasm. I didn't say much, just listened, nodding when she glanced back. There was something about her, maybe the way she seemed so at ease out here, like the forest was her element. We were maybe 2 miles in when the clouds started rolling in, heavy and gray. The air got thick, that damp smell you get before a storm. Sophia checked her watch, frowning. "We should head back soon," she said. "Rain's coming." Mark grumbled about his new boots getting muddy, but I didn't mind. I liked the idea of a little challenge. Figured it would make for a good story later. I had no clue how much of a story this trip was about to become. The rain came faster than we expected. 1 minute it was just a drizzle, barely enough to dampen my hoodie. The next it was a full-on downpour, sheets of water hammering the forest floor. The trail turned to sludge under our boots, and the trees didn't do much to block the wet. Sophia, Mark, and I were still together, but the rest of the group had scattered their voices, lost in the hiss of rain. My phone showed no bar signal, gone. Mark kept muttering about his soaked jacket, but Sophia stayed focused, scanning the path ahead. "We need to find higher ground," she said, voice steady despite the chaos. "This low trail is going to flood. We pushed forward, mud sucking at our steps. Sophia let her ponytail slick to her neck jacket, clinging to her frame. I couldn't help but notice how she moved calm, deliberate, like she'd faced worse than a storm. Mark lagged behind, fumbling with his phone, useless without service. I stayed close to Sophia, partly because she seemed to know what she was doing, partly because I didn't want to get lost out here. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, sharp and heavy. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and threatening. We reached a rocky outcrop, a cluster of boulders that offered some cover. Sophia stopped to check her map, but the paper was half-soaked ink bleeding. "We're not far from camp," she said, squinting through the rain. "Maybe a mile if we cut through." She stepped forward, navigating a patch of loose stones when it happened. A sharp cry tore from her throat, raw and sudden. I spun around just as she stumbled, clutching her leg. Her face twisted in pain. "Sophia!" I shouted, rushing to her side. She was already sinking to the ground, one hand gripping a tree root. "Snake!" she gasped, pointing to a flash of black and yellow slithering into the underbrush. My stomach dropped. A rattlesnake. Maybe I didn't know enough to be sure, but the way her hand shook told me it wasn't good. Blood seeped through her cargo pants high on her thigh, a dark stain spreading fast. Mark froze, eyes wide, useless. "Oh God, what do we do?" he stammered, backing away like he might bolt. I ignored him, dropping to my knees beside Safra. Her breathing was quick, shallow, her skin pale under the rain. "Ethan," she said, voice tight, but controlled. "Listen to me. It's venomous. You need to act fast." Her eyes locked on mine, steady despite the pain. I could see the effort it took to stay calm. Her jaw clenched, sweat mixing with rain on her forehead. "You know how to handle a snake bite?" she asked. I shook my head, heart pounding. "Some from a first aid course, but nothing like this." My hands hovered unsure. She grabbed my wrist firm. "You have to suck the venom out now before it spreads." I stared at her, the words sinking in like a punch. "Suck it out." My mouth went dry, but her grip tightened. "Ethan, I trust you. You can do this. Don't think, just do it." Her voice was urgent, cutting through the panic in my head. I nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. Tell me what to do." She leaned back against the tree, wincing. "Rip the fabric around the bite. Get to the wound. Suck hard. Spit it out. Don't swallow. Venom's harmless in your stomach, but don't risk it." I fumbled with her pants, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. The fabric tore with a wet rip, exposing the wound. 2 angry punctures, red and swelling high on her thigh just below the hem of her shorts. Blood trickled down her skin, mixing with mud. I glanced at her, hesitating for a split second. Her eyes were on me, not judging, just waiting. "Go," she whispered. I took a deep breath, leaned down, and pressed my lips to the wound. The taste was sharp, metallic, warm. I sucked hard, pulling the venom and blood into my mouth, spitting it onto the ground. Again. My hands gripped her leg to steady her, her muscles tensing under my fingers. "Good," she murmured, voice strained. "Keep going. Steady." Her hand rested on my shoulder, light but grounding. I could feel her shaking, but she didn't let it show in her voice. My heart was hammering, the rain soaking my back, but I kept at it, sucking and spitting, praying I was doing it right. "You're doing great, Ethan," she said, softer now, her breath hitching. "Don't stop." I looked up once her eyes half closed. Pain etched into her face. "So, stay with me," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "You still hear me?" She nodded faintly, a ghost of a smile. "I hear you. Not going anywhere." Her words were a lifeline pulling me through the fear. Mark was still there pacing, muttering about calling for help, but he was useless. It was just me and her, the rain in that damn bite. I kept going until the wound looked less swollen, the bleeding slower. My mouth tasted like copper, my hands slick with her blood and rain. "Think that's enough?" I asked, voice shaking. She took a ragged breath, nodding. "You did it. You bought me time." But she couldn't walk. Her leg was weak, her face pale, and the storm wasn't letting up. I looked around. No camp in sight, no signal, no one coming. The venom might be slowed, but she needed help fast. I glanced at a rain dripping from my hair. We need to move. Find shelter. She nodded, gripping my arm. There's a ridge up ahead. Might have a cave or something. Her voice was fading, but her eyes were still sharp, trusting me. I didn't know how we'd make it, but I wasn't about to let her down. The rain didn't let up. It pounded the forest, turning the ground into a slick mess of mud and leaves. The air was heavy cold, biting through my soaked hoodie. Sophia leaned against me, her weight heavier now, her steps faltering. The venom was taking its toll, even if I'd gotten some of it out. Her face was pale lips, pressed tight, but her eyes stayed sharp, flickering with that same stubborn strength I'd noticed back at the trailhead. I half carried her, my arm around her waist, her arm slung over my shoulder. We needed shelter somewhere to wait out the storm until help came. If it came up there, she murmured, nodding toward a rocky ridge, barely visible through the downpour. Her voice was weak, but sure, like she was still calling the shots. I squinted, spotting a shallow overhang in the rocks. Not quite a cave, but enough to keep us dry. Got it, I said, tightening my grip on her. The ground was treacherous, roots and stones hidden under mud. Every step felt like a gamble, but I wasn't about to let her fall. Mark had vanished, probably ran off to find the others, or maybe just to save himself. It didn't matter. It was just us now. We reached the overhang, a narrow shelf of rock barely deep enough to sit under. I eased Sophia down her back against the stone. Her injured leg stretched out. The wound looked better, not as swollen, but it was still red angry. She shivered, her cargo pants torn, and soaked her jacket, doing little against the chill. I pulled the emergency poncho from my pack, a flimsy plastic thing, and draped it over us, tying one end to a branch to block the wind. It wasn't much, but it was something. The air smelled of wet rock and pine, sharp and raw. Thunder rolled again, closer, now shaking the ground. "You okay?" I asked, crouching beside her. My voice sounded louder than I meant in the quiet under the rock. She nodded, but her teeth chattered, her hands clutching her arms. "Cold?" she admitted, almost a whisper. "And tired." Her eyes met mine, softer than I'd ever seen them. Not the confident Miss Sophia, the ex-army nurse who led the hike like it was her mission. Just a woman hurting, fighting to stay awake. I didn't know much about venom, but I knew enough to keep her alert. "Talk to me," I said, sitting close. "Don't sleep, okay?" She gave a faint smile like she knew the drill. "You're bossy when you're scared," she said, her voice but teasing. I laughed despite everything. "Yeah, well, I'm not the one who got bit by a snake." She chuckled, then winced her hand, brushing her thigh. "Fair point." The poncho flapped in the wind, letting in a gust of cold air. I shifted closer, our shoulders touching, trying to block the draft. "We need to stay warm," I said, hesitating. "You good with that?" She looked at me, eyes searching mine for a second. "Ethan, I'm not going to freeze out here because of pride." She leaned into me, her head resting against my chest. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close, her body trembling against mine. It wasn't romantic. Not then. It was survival, pure and simple. Her warmth mixed with mine, her breath steadying as we sat there, rain drumming outside. My heart was still racing from the bite, the panic, but holding her grounded me. "Tell me something," she said after a while, her voice barely above the rain. "Anything. Keep me awake." I swallowed, my mind scrambling. Okay. I used to want to be a pilot when I was a kid. Thought I'd fly planes, see the world." She tilted her head slightly, looking up at me. "What happened?" I shrugged, feeling the weight of her against me. "Life, I guess. Got into coding instead. Safer, less sky." She laughed softly, a sound that felt like a small victory. "You'd have been a good pilot," she said. "You don't panic under pressure." I glanced down at her, surprised. "You sure I'm freaking out right now?" Her eyes held mine steady despite the pain. "You're here. That's enough." Her words hit harder than they should have, settling somewhere deep. I didn't know what to say, so I just tightened my arm around her. Your turn, I said. Tell me something. She was quiet for a moment, her breath warm against my neck. After my divorce, she started voice low. I thought I'd never trust anyone again. Not like that. Spent years building walls, keeping people at arm's length, even Jordan sometimes. She paused, her fingers curling into her sleeve. But tonight I'm not scared. Not with you here. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to make of it. Her words, her trust. She wasn't just Jordan's mom anymore. She was Sophia, raw and real, fighting to stay alive under this rock with me. Guess we're both stuck then, I said, trying to keep it light. She smiled, faint but genuine. Good company to be stuck with. The rain kept falling. The night growing darker, colder. My phone was dead. No signal anyway. I checked her pulse. Steady but slow. Stay with me, Sophia. I said, my voice firm. We're getting out of this. She nodded her hand, finding mine, squeezing weakly. I know. Hours passed the storm, unrelenting. I kept talking dumb stuff about my favorite coding projects, old camping trips, anything to keep her awake. She listened sometimes, replying, sometimes just nodding her head heavy against my chest. The cold seeped into my bones, but I didn't move, didn't let go. Her breathing was steady, her hands still in mine. We were alone, cut off from the world, but in that moment, it felt like we were all that mattered. Dawn was somewhere out there, and with it a chance. I just had to keep her warm, keep her here until it came. Dawn broke slowly, the rain easing into a faint drizzle as gray light filtered through the trees. My arms ached from holding Sophia all night, her body pressed against mine under the flimsy poncho. The cold had settled deep, my fingers stiff, my hoodie still damp. Sopher's breathing was steady now, shallower than I'd like, but she was still here, her hand loosely curled in mine. The forest was quiet, the storm's roar replaced by the drip of water off leaves and the distant call of a bird. I'd tied my red bandana to a branch above the overhang before dark, hoping it had catch someone's eye. It was all I could do. Wait and hope. Sophia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Ethan. Her voice was weak, scratchy, but it was there. Relief hit me like a wave. Yeah, I'm right here, I said, shifting to meet her gaze. Her face was pale, smudged with dirt, but her eyes were clear, focused. You're still with me? I added, half a question. She managed a faint smile. Told you I wasn't going anywhere. Her fingers tightened briefly on mine, a small gesture that felt bigger than it should have. I checked her leg. The wound was red, but stable, no worse than before. The venom hadn't spread far thanks to the sucking, but she needed a hospital. I scanned the horizon and the air heavy with mist. No sign of anyone yet. They'll find us, I said, more to convince myself than her. She nodded, leaning back against the rock. You did good, Ethan. Most people would have panicked. Her voice was soft, almost proud. I shrugged, feeling my face heat up despite the cold. Didn't have a choice. Couldn't just leave you? Her eyes held mine for a moment. Something unspoken passing between us. Not Jordan's mom. Not the confident ex-nurse. Just Sophia, vulnerable, but strong, trusting me in a way I hadn't expected. A faint shout broke the silence, distant, but real. I stood, heart racing, and climbed onto a boulder, squinting through the trees. Flashlights flickered in the mist, voices growing louder. Here, I yelled, waving my arms, the bandana flapping like a signal flare. Within minutes, the rescue team, park rangers, and a few of Sophia's coworkers reached us. Jordan was with them, his face pale, eyes wide with worry. Ethan, Mom! He shouted, rushing over. I stepped back as a paramedic knelt beside Sophia, checking her pulse, her wound. Rattlesnake bite, I said, voice. I sucked out what I could. The paramedic nodded, already prepping and for. You probably saved her life. Good call. They moved fast, strapping Sophia to a stretcher, her eyes meeting mine one last time before they carried her down the trail. Thank you. She mouthed, too soft for anyone else to hear. I nodded, my throat tight, and followed the group, Jordan at my side. He clapped my shoulder hard. Man, I owe you. I don't know what we'd do if he trailed off, shaking his head. I didn't know what to say. The weight of the night of her blood on my hands. Her warmth against me sat heavy in my chest. At the hospital, an hour's drive from the trailhead, the ER was a blur of white coats and beeping monitors. Sophia was stable antivenom administered vitals steady. The doctor said the venom hadn't reached her bloodstream thanks to the early intervention. She'd be fine after a few days' rest. Jordan and the others crowded the waiting room, relieved, swapping stories about the storm. I stayed quiet, leaning against a wall, replaying the night in my head. The way she'd looked at me under that rock, the way her hand felt in mine. It wasn't just survival anymore. Something had shifted and I wasn't sure what to do with it. Later, when visitors were allowed, I slipped into her room. She was propped up in bed, and 4 in her arm. Her hair, loose face still pale but brighter. Jordan had gone to grab coffee, so it was just us. You didn't have to stay, she said, her voice stronger now, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I shrugged, sitting in the chair beside her. Wanted to make sure you were okay. She studied me, her eyes searching like she was seeing me for the first time. You did more than that, Ethan. You stayed when most would have run. I looked down, my hands still flecked with dirt from the forest. Couldn't leave you out there. My voice was quieter than I meant. She reached out her fingers, brushing mine light, but deliberate. I know, and that it means more than you think. Her touch lingered, warm, steady, sending a jolt through me. I didn't pull away, but I felt Jordan's shadow in the back of my mind. This was his mom. I couldn't cross that line, could I? She pulled her hand back, breaking the moment. You should get some rest, she said, her tone softer now, almost careful. You've earned it. I nodded, standing, but her words stayed with me, heavy and unanswered. As I left the room, I glanced back. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but all I could hear was the echo of her voice from the night before telling me she wasn't scared because I was there. 2 weeks passed since the hospital and life slipped back into its usual rhythm. Or at least it tried to. I was back in my apartment, hunched over my laptop, debugging code for a client who kept changing their mind. Denver streets buzzed outside my window, the city moving on like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake it. The weight of that night in the forest, the feel of Safra's hand in mine, her voice steady even as she fought to stay awake. It wasn't just the snake bite or the rain. It was her. The way she'd looked at me like I was more than just Jordan's friend. Jordan hadn't brought it up much. He'd thanked me a dozen times, clapped me on the back, even bought me a beer to say I was a damn hero. I brushed it off, told him it was nothing, but I didn't tell him everything. Not about the way I'd held his mom under that rock or the way her words had stuck with me. Couldn't. It felt like betraying something, him or maybe myself. So, I kept quiet, went back to my routine, tried to pretend it was just another weekend. Then, my phone buzzed one afternoon, the screen lighting up with a text from an unknown number. I opened it and my breath caught. Max misses you. He's been moping around the backyard. If you're free, you know where to find us. Sophia. Max was her dog. A scruffy golden retriever I'd met a few times at Jordan's place. I stared at the message, rereading it. The words simple but heavy. She didn't have to say it outright, but I knew what it meant. An invitation, not just for the dog. I sat there, thumb hovering over the keyboard. The sun was out, casting a warm glow through my window. Nothing like the storm that had trapped us. I thought about her in that hospital bed, her fingers brushing mine, her voice, saying she wasn't scared because I was there. I typed back Max's got good taste. I'll swing by around 5. I hit send before I could overthink it, my heart kicking up a notch. When I pulled up to her house, a tidy 2-story in a quiet Denver suburb, the air smelled of cut grass and late summer. Sophia was on the porch tossing a tennis ball for Max, who bounded across the lawn. She wore jeans and a loose sweater, her hair down softer than I'd ever seen it. "Hey!" she called, smiling as I stepped out of my car. Not the sharp, confident smile from the trailhead, but something warmer, unguarded. "Didn't think you'd actually show." "Couldn't let Max down," I said, grinning as the dog ran over, tail wagging. I scratched his ears, glancing at her. You look better. She laughed, a low, easy sound. Thanks to you. We walked to the park nearby, Max trotting ahead, the silence between us, comfortable but charged. The sky was clear, golden light slanting through the trees. I wanted to ask about the text, about what it meant, but I didn't know how. She broke the silence first, tossing the ball for Max. You didn't have to stay out there, she said, her voice quiet. Most people would have gone for help. Left me with that idiot Mark. I shrugged, kicking a pebble. Didn't feel right leaving you. She stopped walking, turning to face me. Her eyes were steady, searching. That's what I keep thinking about. You stayed even when it was easier to go. My throat tightened. I looked at her. Really looked, and saw something new. Not just Jordan's mom. Not just the woman I'd saved. Someone who trusted me when it mattered most. Some things are worth staying for. I said the words, slipping out before I could stop them. Her lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Some things are. We didn't say more. Didn't need to. We walked back to her place, Max panting happily between us. As I turned to leave, she touched my arm. Light but deliberate. Come back anytime, Ethan. Max is not the only one who'd like that. I nodded, my chest warm, and drove home under a sky too clear to feel real. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. Not yet.